He was 58 years old, and I married him after knowing him for 9 days. On our wedding night, he locked the hotel door, sat at the edge of the bed, and made one demand. I remember staring at the carpet instead of his face. If you're listening to me right now, maybe you're already judging me. That's fine. I judged myself plenty. I'm not telling this story to be defended. I'm telling it because sometimes a decision looks reckless from the outside and completely reasonable when you're the one standing in the room. This happened 3 years ago. No, closer to 4 now. Time moved strangely after that winter. I was 46 then, living alone in a coastal city that survives on tourism and denial. The kind of place where the sea is always blue in photographs but grey most mornings in real life. I worked at a small art gallery on the marina. Nothing glamorous. White walls, polished concrete floors, the faint smell of varnish and espresso from the cafe next door. My days were predictable. I unlocked the door at 10. I turned on the track lights. I adjusted price cards that no one read carefully anyway. Predictable felt safe. I had been divorced for 8 years. My ex-husband had moved inland with a woman who wore linen all year round and posted motivational quotes online. We had no children. That fact used to feel like a wound. Later it felt like an empty shelf. Eventually it just became space. I filled that space with routines. Morning walks by the harbor. Groceries every Wednesday. A glass of red wine in the same chair each night, the fabric thinning where my elbow rested. I told myself I liked the quiet. And most days, I did. Then he walked into the gallery. He was tall, slightly stooped, with silver at his temples and a navy polo shirt tucked too neatly into beige trousers. An Arab tourist, he said, here for a month. His English was careful but strong. He smelled faintly of oud and hotel soap. He studied a painting of the shoreline for a long time. Longer than most people do. Most visitors glance, nod, and drift back toward the sun. He asked questions. About the artist. About the tides. About whether locals ever get tired of looking at the same horizon. That last question stayed with me. Do you ever get tired of the same horizon? At the time, I laughed and said something light. I don't remember the exact wording. Something like, only when the boats don't move. No, that's not right. It was simpler than that. But the point is, I noticed him noticing things. He came back the next day. And the next. We had coffee at the cafe beside the gallery. Then dinner at a seafood place overlooking the marina where the chairs scrape loudly against the wooden deck. He told me he was divorced too. 2 grown sons. A business in Dubai. He was on what he called a personal reset. That phrase should have made me pause. But I was flattered. And I was lonely in a way I didn't admit to myself. Not desperate. Just open. He listened when I spoke. He asked about my marriage without prying. He said he admired independent women. He said it like it was a compliment, not a challenge. On the 7th day, he asked me if I believed in second chances at happiness. Let me ask you something, before I go further. Have you ever mistaken intensity for certainty? I'm not asking lightly. I'm genuinely curious. Because when someone looks at you as if you're the only solid thing in their line of sight, it can feel like fate instead of momentum. By the 9th day, he proposed. Yes. 9. It wasn't on one knee. It was across a small restaurant table with a white tablecloth and a candle that kept flickering out in the breeze. He said he didn't believe in wasting time when something was clear. He said we were both adults. He said we could build a life that wasn't dictated by fear. And I said yes. The wedding happened quietly at a municipal office. 2 witnesses from the hotel staff. A simple cream dress I bought that morning. My hands were steady when I signed the papers. I thought I was choosing courage. That night, back in his hotel suite, the air conditioner hummed too loudly. He turned the lock twice. Not once. Twice. He loosened his cufflinks and sat down on the edge of the bed. Then he told me what he expected from his wife. And my mouth went dry. The days before the wedding felt strangely calm. That's the part people don't understand when they hear 9 days. They imagine chaos, drama, impulse. But it wasn't like that. It was quiet, measured, almost orderly. His name was Khalid. I haven't said that yet, have I? Funny how I avoided it. Khalid. He stayed at a business hotel near the marina, not one of the flashy resorts. Beige lobby, overwatered plants, a faint lemon scent in the hallways that never quite masked the old carpet underneath. He woke early. Earlier than I did. He'd text me around 6:30 most mornings. Good morning, Camora. The sea is calm today. That was one of his first messages. I remember staring at it while my kettle clicked off in the kitchen. No emojis. No pet names. Just that sentence. The sea is calm today. He would walk before breakfast, then meet me near the gallery. Sometimes he brought dates from a specialty shop downtown. Soft, sticky, wrapped in thin gold paper. He said they reminded him of home. He talked about his sons in practical terms. One studied engineering in London. The other worked with him in the business. He never showed me photos at first. I noticed that. Most fathers would. I told myself he was private, dignified. Looking back, I wonder if I mistook omission for depth. We fell into a rhythm quickly. He'd stand at the gallery doorway while I rearranged frames. He'd lean slightly against the wall, hands folded behind his back. Watching. Not in a possessive way. Just present. At least that's how I read it then. He asked thoughtful questions about my life. Why my marriage ended. Why I stayed in this city after the divorce. Why I never remarried. I told him the truth. That stability mattered more to me now than excitement. That I didn't want chaos in my 40s. That I liked knowing where my evenings would end. He nodded when I said that. Slowly. But once, just once, he said something that snagged in my chest. A woman alone too long, he said gently, can become too comfortable without protection. He smiled when he said it. As if it were caring advice. I laughed it off. I even touched his arm. But that sentence lingered longer than it should have. Let me ask you something. When someone says something that doesn't quite sit right, do you examine it? Or do you polish it until it shines? I'm asking because I polished a lot. The proposal came fast, yes, but the idea had been building in small, steady bricks. He talked about partnership like it was a contract of safety. He said he admired my independence, but he also said marriage created structure. He liked that word. Structure. He spoke about bringing me to Dubai eventually, or splitting time between there and here. He said I wouldn't have to work unless I wanted to. He said he preferred his wife focused on home and dignity. I remember thinking that sounded old-fashioned, but not threatening. I'd been working since I was 19. The idea of someone wanting to provide felt restful. That's the word I used in my head. Restful. My friend Elena raised an eyebrow when I told her. 9 days, she said, stirring her cappuccino too hard. Foam sloshed over the rim. Yes. And you trust him? I paused. Not long, but long enough. I trust how he makes me feel, I answered. Even now, that sentence makes me shift in my seat. The wedding itself was simple. The municipal office had fluorescent lights that hummed faintly. The clerk wore reading glasses on a chain and mispronounced Khalid's last name. He corrected her politely. I signed with a pen that scratched against the paper. No music. No flowers. Just signatures. Afterward, we ate lunch at the marina. Grilled fish. Sparkling water. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. My wife, he said softly. It sounded solid. That afternoon, I packed a small overnight bag and brought it to his hotel. I folded my dress carefully into the wardrobe. I remember smoothing the fabric twice, even though it was already flat. I felt steady. But there was one small thing. And I almost didn't mention it. When we entered the suite, he took my phone from my hand casually and placed it on the desk across the room. "You won't need distractions tonight," he said with a smile. It wasn't forceful. It wasn't angry. Still, something in my stomach tightened. I told myself it was nerves. Wedding night nerves. Nothing more. He poured 2 glasses of water. Not wine. Water. He locked the door. Once. Then again. And when he sat down at the edge of the bed, his back straight, hands resting on his thighs, the room felt smaller than it had that afternoon. He cleared his throat. "There is something we must agree on," he said. And suddenly, the sea outside didn't feel calm at all. On the drive back from the municipal office, I kept staring at my left hand on the steering wheel. The ring looked heavier than it had in the store. It wasn't oversized. It wasn't flashy. Just a solid gold band with a small square diamond. Practical. Mature. That's how I described it to the clerk. Mature. The hotel suite felt different that night. Not romantic. Not nervous in the sweet way. Different in the way a room feels after someone rearranges the furniture while you weren't looking. The curtains were drawn tight. The bedside lamps were on, casting a yellow light that flattened everything. He locked the door twice. I noticed because the second click was slower. Maybe that was normal. Maybe I'm attaching meaning after the fact. I don't know. But I remember the sound. He removed his watch and placed it carefully on the glass desk. Lined it up parallel with the edge. Then he loosened his cufflinks. I stood near the dresser, smoothing a wrinkle on my dress that wasn't there. He sat on the bed and looked at me. "You are my wife now," he said. Not harsh. Not tender either. Just factual. I nodded. He gestured for me to sit. I did, but not too close. There was still space between us. A strip of white hotel bedding untouched. Then he explained. In his culture, his words, marriage came with structure. A wife did not work unless necessary. A wife prioritized her husband's household. A wife did not maintain close friendships with men. A wife relocated to be with her husband. Relocate. That word echoed. I said, "Relocate where?" He looked surprised. As if it were obvious. "To Dubai, of course. My home is there. You will come within 3 months. 3 months. I tried to process the timeline. My apartment. My job. My gallery clients. The marina I could navigate blindfolded. He continued speaking. Calmly. Methodically. He said he preferred modest dress. He said social media was inappropriate for married women. He said financial matters would be handled by him. "I will provide everything," he said. Provide. My throat tightened, but I didn't interrupt. Not yet. I remember the hum of the air conditioner growing louder. Or maybe my ears were ringing. Hard to say. The room felt smaller. The yellow light suddenly harsh against the white walls. I asked, carefully, "Did you assume I understood all this?" He tilted his head. "You said yes." Yes. I had said yes to marriage. Not to relocation contracts. Not to erasing my life in 90 days. But I hadn't asked the right questions either. That part is on me. Let me pause here for a second. If you've ever agreed to something big without clarifying the details, because you didn't want to seem difficult, tell me. I'm not fishing for validation. I genuinely want to know how many of us confuse silence with harmony. He stood and walked toward the minibar. Poured water into a glass. Offered me one. I declined. My hands were already cold. "You will not need to worry anymore," he said. "Your independence is admirable. But now you can rest." Rest. I had never described my life as exhausting. It was steady. It was mine. I asked him about my job. He smiled slightly. It is not appropriate for my wife to sell paintings to strangers. There it was. Not a suggestion. A standard. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger yet. Not fear. Something more like misalignment. Like stepping off a curb you didn't see. I tried to explain that my work mattered to me. That I wasn't looking to be taken care of in that way. He listened. But his expression didn't change. This is not negotiation, he said gently. Gently. That word stung more than if he had raised his voice. I looked down at my dress. Cream fabric. Slightly wrinkled now. My wedding dress. Bought that morning in a rush between doubt and determination. And suddenly I couldn't remember why I had been so certain. Was it his confidence? His age? The way he spoke about stability? Or was it the fear of growing older alone? I'm being honest with you here. I don't fully trust my memory of my own motives. I tell myself I was choosing adventure. But maybe I was running from stillness. I can't untangle that cleanly. He stepped closer to me. And one more thing, he said. My shoulders stiffened before I could stop them. My wife does not sleep in separate rooms. We begin properly tonight. The way he said properly made my skin tighten. There was nothing violent in his tone. Nothing overtly threatening. That almost made it harder to object. Because what do you protest when everything is framed as tradition? I stood up slowly. I need air, I said. He frowned. Just slightly. Then nodded once. Do not take too long. Do not take too long. I walked into the bathroom instead of outside. Locked the door. Sat on the closed toilet lid and stared at myself in the mirror. My face looked the same. Calm. Composed. If you saw me then, you would not have thought I was unraveling, but I was calculating. If I left now, what did that mean legally? Socially? Financially? Had I just married a man whose expectations were written in stone? Or was this a test of whether I would fold? I splashed water on my wrists. Cold porcelain under my palms. Observe or confront. Trust that this was culture and compromise, or verify that I hadn't just signed away my autonomy. On the other side of the bathroom door, I could hear him moving. Slow steps. A drawer opening. I took one long breath. And I unlocked the door. When I opened the bathroom door, he was standing by the window. The curtains were still drawn. His silhouette looked rigid against the thin strip of light peeking through the edges. He turned when he heard the latch click. You are upset, he said. Not a question. I walked past him and sat in the armchair near the desk instead of returning to the bed. The fabric scratched lightly against my legs. I folded my hands in my lap to keep them from shaking. I didn't know, I said carefully. About Dubai. About quitting my job. About all of it. He exhaled through his nose. Slow. Controlled. I assumed a mature woman understands what marriage requires. Mature woman. The phrase landed heavier than it should have. As if maturity meant surrender. I told him I needed time. That relocating wasn't something you decide in one conversation. That my life wasn't temporary just because he was visiting. He walked toward me then, not aggressive, but deliberate. He crouched slightly so we were eye level. You are thinking like a single woman, he said. You are not single. Something in my chest tightened. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I remember the hotel lamp buzzing faintly. I remember the faint scent of starch from the fresh sheets. And then I noticed something else. On the desk behind him was a folder I hadn't seen earlier. Thin. Cream-colored. My name written on the front in black ink. I hadn't written it. My stomach dropped. I stood up, stepped around him, and picked it up. Inside were photocopies of my passport. My divorce papers. A printed outline titled Wife Transition Plan. I am not exaggerating. It listed timelines. Month 1, prepare for relocation. Month 2, Close personal accounts. Month 3. Move to Dubai. It even included notes about transferring funds into a shared account managed by him. Managed by him. My hands felt numb holding that paper. Why do you have copies of my documents? I asked. He didn't hesitate. For efficiency. Efficiency. I don't remember if I laughed or if it just escaped me like a cough. Something sharp came out of my mouth. You know that moment when reality tilts? When what felt like romance rearranges itself into strategy? That was it. I flipped through the pages again, slower this time. There were notes in the margins. Small handwriting. Observations about my job. My apartment lease. Even a comment about my friend Elena being influential. Influential. He had been gathering information. How long have you been planning this? I asked. He straightened. Since I knew you were suitable. Suitable. I felt heat rise up my neck. Not dramatic heat. Not rage. Just a spreading awareness that I had misjudged something fundamental. Let me be honest here. The pain wasn't loud at first. It was quiet. Clinical. Like reading a diagnosis you weren't prepared for. If you've ever discovered that someone was mapping your life without your consent, you understand that particular chill. I sat back down because my knees felt unsteady. You could have discussed this with me, I said. It is understood, he replied. Understood by whom? My mind started replaying the past 9 days. The questions he asked. The way he listened. The way he watched me at the gallery door. Not possessive. No, that's not right. It wasn't obvious possession. It was assessment. I had been interviewed. And I passed. That realization hurt more than the relocation plan. Because I had believed he saw me. Not my utility. Not my adaptability. Me. I looked at the wedding band on my finger. Gold. Smooth. Heavy. I am not an employee, I said quietly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam anything. He simply said, "You are my responsibility now." Responsibility. That word broke something. If you've ever been reduced to a role you didn't audition for, you know the feeling. It's not explosive. It's suffocating. I asked him if he would cancel the relocation plan. If we could build something here instead. Slowly. Equally. He shook his head once. My life is established, he said. You will join it. Join it. Not build together. Not create new. Join. The lowest point wasn't the demand to sleep beside him. It wasn't the relocation timeline. It was realizing he never intended partnership. He intended absorption. I walked to the mirror again. Touched the ring. For a split second, no, longer than that, I considered convincing myself this was compromise. That maybe love required reshaping. But the folder on the desk existed. The photocopies existed. The handwriting existed. This wasn't misunderstanding. It was planning. And I was the only one who hadn't been informed. I didn't argue anymore after that. Not because I agreed. Because I needed him to think I was settling. There's a difference. I closed the folder, placed it back on the desk exactly where it had been, and turned toward him with what I hoped looked like composure. My heartbeat had slowed by then. Not from calm. From calculation. You should have told me earlier, I said, keeping my tone even. But I understand that traditions matter to you. He studied my face for a long second. Measuring. I am glad you see reason, he replied. See reason. That phrase almost made me smile. Almost. I walked to the bed and sat on the edge, leaving space between us again. I smoothed the duvet once, twice. A stalling gesture. I needed to think through the next few hours, not the next few months. If I confronted him fully, it would escalate. If I stormed out, it would become dramatic. And drama would give him leverage, emotionally, legally, maybe even financially. So I shifted my posture. Softer shoulders. Slower breathing. 3 months feels fast, I said. Perhaps we can revisit the timeline tomorrow. Tonight is overwhelming. He nodded once. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. I don't know if he believed I was yielding or if he believed resistance would fade. But he relaxed slightly. Removed his shoes. Placed them neatly beside the bed. He moved toward me then. Close enough that I could smell the faint trace of cologne on his collar. We begin properly, he repeated. I need to be clear about something. He wasn't violent. He wasn't rough. If you're expecting a scene of force, that's not what happened. What happened was expectation. He assumed access. Assumed compliance. Assumed that a signed document erased hesitation. And I lay there stiff as the hotel sheets beneath me, staring at the ceiling while he treated intimacy like confirmation of ownership. I won't describe it in detail. Not because I'm protecting him. Because the details aren't the point. The point is the absence of mutuality. When it was over, he fell asleep quickly. On his back. One arm across his chest. I lay awake. The air conditioner clicked on and off. On and off. The digital clock on the nightstand read 2:17 a.m. Then 2:18. I stared at the ceiling and realized something with frightening clarity. If I moved to Dubai, this dynamic would harden. Not soften. Tonight wasn't an introduction. It was a preview. I slid carefully out of bed around 3 a.m. My movements slow, deliberate. I didn't turn on the lamp. I used the light from the bathroom. My overnight bag was still near the wardrobe. I knelt beside it and quietly removed my passport from the inner pocket. Slipped it into my purse instead. Then I took my phone from the desk. He had placed it screen down earlier. I hadn't noticed that until now. I stepped into the bathroom and locked the door again. The tile was cold under my feet. I sat on the edge of the tub and scrolled through my messages. There were 2 missed texts from Elena. How are you feeling? Still alive. I typed back, call me at 8 a.m. urgent. Then I stopped. Deleted it. That felt dramatic. I retyped, can you meet for coffee in the morning? Need advice. That was true. As I stared at the message before hitting send, doubt crept in. Was I overreacting? Was this simply cultural difference amplified by my Western expectations? Was I being rigid? I actually asked myself that. It's uncomfortable admitting that I doubted my own discomfort. But I did. Let me ask you something here. Have you ever minimized your own alarm because you didn't want to seem intolerant? It's a tricky line. I pressed send. Back in the bedroom, he shifted in his sleep. I froze for a second, then continued moving. I opened the closet and quietly hung my dress back inside my garment bag. I wasn't packing yet. Not fully. But I was preparing. Preparation calmed me. Around 6 a.m., he woke. Sat up. Looked at me by the window. You did not sleep, he observed. I was thinking, I said. He nodded as if thinking was acceptable, as long as it concluded correctly. He showered. Dressed. Moved with the same deliberate neatness as the night before. Before leaving for a breakfast meeting, yes, he had scheduled one the morning after our wedding, he turned to me. We will review the plan tonight, he said. You will see it is wise. Wise. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and the room exhaled. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the silence. My wedding ring felt heavier than it had the day before. I twisted it once around my finger. Then I picked up the cream folder again. I photographed every page with my phone, every margin note, every timeline. Because if this was going to be a negotiation, I needed evidence. Or maybe it wasn't going to be negotiation at all. Maybe it was going to be exit. Tell me this, if you realized on your wedding night that you had misunderstood the contract entirely, would you try to rewrite it, or tear it up? I folded the folder closed and placed it back exactly where he'd left it. And then I began to plan. By 7:45 a.m., I was downstairs in the hotel cafe. I didn't wait for him to return. I didn't leave a note. I just walked out with my purse over my shoulder and the wedding ring still on my finger because removing it in the elevator felt theatrical. The marina air hit my face sharp and cold. I remember that clearly. Or maybe it wasn't that cold and I just felt raw. No, it was cold. I could see my breath. Elena was already at the cafe when I arrived. Same corner table. Same chipped saucer she always seems to get. She looked at my face before she looked at my ring. "What happened?" she asked. I sat down slowly. My knees felt unreliable again. "He came with paperwork," I said. She blinked. "Paperwork?" I unlocked my phone and slid it across the table. She scrolled through the photos of the wife transition plan. Her mouth tightened with every swipe. "This is premeditated," she said. That word settled heavily between us. I told her everything. The relocation. The shared accounts. The comment about her being influential. I even described the way he'd aligned his watch with the desk edge, because somehow that detail mattered. Elena listened without interrupting. That's why she's still in my life. When I finished, she leaned back and folded her arms. "You need a lawyer," she said. "Not you need to talk to him. Not give it time. A lawyer." The clarity steadied me. By 9:30 a.m., I was sitting in a small legal office 3 streets away from the marina. Beige walls. A faint smell of toner from the printer. The attorney, a woman in her early 50s with square glasses, read the marriage certificate twice. "You can file for annulment based on misrepresentation," she said. "But you must act quickly." Quickly. The word didn't scare me anymore. It energized me. She explained that because the marriage had been registered locally and not yet recognized internationally, there was a window. A narrow one. If I delayed relocation paperwork or financial merging, the process would remain simpler. I asked her if I was overreacting. She didn't smile. "Did you consent to the terms outlined in that document?" "No." "Then you are not overreacting." The sentence landed clean. I left her office with a folder of my own this time. My paperwork. My options. My control. Back at the hotel around noon, Khalid was seated at the desk reviewing something on his laptop. The cream folder sat beside him. He looked up when I entered. "You were gone," he said. "Yes." He waited for explanation. I didn't provide one. I set my purse down calmly, removed the ring from my finger, placed it on the desk next to his watch. "We need to talk," I said. He studied the ring first, then my face. "This is unnecessary," he replied evenly. "Adjustment takes time." "I'm not adjusting," I said. "I'm declining." The room tightened. He stood slowly, not abruptly. He was always controlled. "You misunderstand marriage," he said. "No," I answered. "I misunderstood you." There it was. The shift. He stepped closer. Not threatening, but imposing. His height suddenly felt intentional. "You are reacting emotionally," he said. I shook my head. "I met with a lawyer." That changed the temperature instantly. His jaw flexed once. Just once. "You went outside our marriage." "Our marriage began with a plan I never saw," I replied. My voice surprised me. It was steady, low. "If you disagree with what I did next, I understand. Some people believe marriage demands endurance. Some believe confrontation should happen privately, gently, repeatedly. I didn't choose that." I slid my phone across the desk and showed him the photos. "You prepared this without my consent," I said. "That qualifies as misrepresentation." He stared at the screen. For the first time since I met him, his composure cracked, not loudly, but subtly. His shoulders stiffened. His breathing changed. "This is cultural structure," he said. No, I replied. This is unilateral control. The silence stretched. He could have argued louder. He could have softened. Instead, he shifted tactics. You are making a mistake, he said quietly. You will regret throwing away stability. Stability. The word no longer tempted me. I prefer uncertainty over erasure, I answered. That line wasn't rehearsed. It came out on its own. He picked up the ring and held it between his fingers. So this is finished, he asked. Yes. Short. Clean. He placed the ring back on the desk with careful precision. As if even endings required symmetry. You will handle the legal matters, he said. Yes. He nodded once. No shouting. No threats. Just a tightening of the air. I packed my overnight bag in 5 minutes. Dress folded. Shoes in the side pocket. Passport secure. At the door, I paused. Not because I doubted myself. Because I wanted to register the moment accurately. I had married him less than 24 hours earlier. And I was leaving. As I stepped into the hallway, I realized something unexpected. I didn't feel broken. I felt awake. The annulment process took 6 weeks. 6 very long, very ordinary weeks. Nothing dramatic happened during that time. No surprise confrontations. No desperate messages. Khalid left the country 3 days after I moved back into my apartment. I know that because the hotel manager, who had served as one of our witnesses, called to confirm he'd checked out. That part felt almost administrative. My apartment smelled slightly stale when I unlocked the door that first afternoon. I had only been gone 1 night, but it felt longer. The air inside was still. My armchair waited in the same position near the window. A half-empty wine bottle stood on the kitchen counter where I'd left it before the wedding. Evidence of a life paused. I set my overnight bag down and stood there for a minute, listening to the refrigerator hum. A car passing outside. My own breathing. I expected tears. They didn't come. Instead, I made tea. Boiled water. Chose the chipped blue mug I've had since my 20s. The familiarity steadied me more than any reassurance could have. People asked questions, of course. Elena knew everything. She didn't push. She just showed up with groceries one evening and rearranged my fridge like she always does when she's worried about me. At the gallery, I told a simplified version. It moved too fast, I said. We weren't aligned. Not untrue. Just incomplete. There were moments, though, when doubt crept in sideways. Usually late at night. I would sit in that thinning armchair and replay his words. You will regret throwing away stability. Regret is a patient emotion. It waits. I asked myself whether I'd been too rigid. Whether I should have negotiated longer. Perhaps 3 months wasn't permanent. Perhaps I could have kept some independence in Dubai. Then I would remember the margin notes in that folder. The word influential beside Elena's name. The timeline written before I even knew it existed. And my spine would straighten again. Let me pause here and ask you something honestly. If you walked away from a marriage after 1 night, would you question your strength or your impulse? I still don't know which one I was testing. The legal appointment for the annulment was anticlimactic. A small courtroom. Neutral walls. A clerk who barely looked up. Khalid did not attend in person. He signed remotely through his attorney. When the judge confirmed the dissolution, she didn't look at me with pity. She looked bored. Which, strangely, comforted me. It meant my life-altering decision was simply paperwork in the larger machinery of the world. Afterward, I walked back to the marina alone. The sky was overcast. The water grey, like it usually is despite what postcards suggest. I stopped outside the gallery before unlocking the door. Reflected in the glass, I looked the same. Same coat. Same posture. But something subtle had shifted. I was less flattered by intensity. Less seduced by certainty. more attentive to quiet contradictions. That doesn't sound dramatic, I know. Growth rarely is. There was loss, though. Let's not pretend there wasn't. I lost the fantasy of being chosen decisively. There's a particular thrill in someone saying, "I know exactly what I want, and it's you." I had to admit I enjoyed that. I also lost a version of myself who believed experience automatically protects you from manipulation. I was 46, not 26. I thought that mattered. Apparently, vulnerability doesn't expire with age. Some evenings, I would catch myself touching the place where the ring had been. The skin felt lighter there. Or maybe that's my memory exaggerating. It probably looked exactly the same. Still, I noticed the absence. Would I act the same way again? That question circled me for months. If I could rewind to that restaurant table with a flickering candle, would I say yes? I think I would still say yes to the proposal. Not because it was wise, but because I needed to see the blueprint fully drawn to understand what I was declining. That sounds contradictory. I know. But sometimes clarity only arrives after commitment reveals its underside. The gallery remained steady. Tourists came and went. The sea shifted colors with the weather. My routines returned, but they felt less like hiding places and more like choices. One afternoon, a woman in her 30s lingered by the doorway after closing. She hesitated before speaking. "I heard about your wedding," she said carefully. "And the annulment. News travels in small cities." "Yes," I replied. She nodded. "I left an engagement last year. It felt humiliating at the time. Now it feels like oxygen." Oxygen. That word stayed with me. Because that's what I felt, eventually. Not triumphant. Not vindicated. Just able to breathe without negotiating the air. There's something I haven't admitted yet. For a few weeks after the annulment, I kept the wedding ring in my bedside drawer. Not because I planned to wear it again. I just wasn't ready to return it through the lawyer. It sat there beside old receipts and a spare set of keys. Small. Solid. Quiet. Sometimes at night, I would open the drawer and look at it. Not nostalgically. More like examining an artifact from a brief, intense chapter of my own psychology. Why did I say yes so quickly? I've given you the practical reasons. Loneliness, flattery, the promise of structure. Those are true. But there was something else beneath them. I wanted to feel chosen without negotiation. That's uncomfortable to say at my age. We like to believe we've outgrown that hunger. That we operate purely from discernment. But even in your 40s, even after divorce, there's a part of you that wants someone to say, "I see you clearly and I am certain." Certainty can feel like safety. It isn't always. When Khalid told me I would regret leaving stability, he assumed stability meant financial provision, geographic relocation, defined roles. He wasn't wrong about what he was offering. He was wrong about what I valued. And I was wrong about assuming his admiration equaled alignment. Those are different currencies. Let me ask you something before I close this out. When you think about forgiveness, do you believe it's something we owe other people, or something we give ourselves so we stop replaying the same scene? There isn't one correct answer. I've learned that much. I don't hate him. That surprises some people when I say it. He was consistent with his worldview. He didn't hide his expectations once the papers were signed. In his mind, he offered structure and protection. I simply declined the terms. What I did have to forgive was my own eagerness. My willingness to overlook that early comment about protection. My instinct to interpret control as care because it arrived in a calm voice. That took longer. If you're listening to this and you've ever walked away from something quickly, an engagement, a partnership, a job, after realizing the fine print didn't match the headline, I hope you don't measure yourself only by the mistake. Measure yourself by the exit. There's a difference between failing to see and refusing to stay blind. I eventually returned the ring through my attorney. No ceremony. No dramatic letter. Just a small insured package sent across the ocean. The day I mailed it, I walked back along the marina and noticed something simple. I wasn't scanning the horizon for change anymore. I wasn't tired of it either. The sea was grey that afternoon. Ordinary. Honest. And that felt enough. So that's my story, folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Kimura's voice travels. Self-respect is quieter than romance, but it lasts longer.